Hello, welcome to Get Invested, episode 6. I am your co-host, Jordan, and over there with me, as always, is my co-host, Matthias. We're jumping back in, as always, into the exciting world of investment and sometimes real estate investment, sometimes just general investment. But today is going to be a little bit of both, though primarily probably focused on real estate investment. Today, we're going to be talking about the philosophy and approach of value add. And we're glad you're here with us, and we're looking forward to getting into this. So speaking of getting into it, without further ado, I'm going to turn over to Matthias to start us off here on value add.
Yeah, well, first I'm going to say it's been a couple of weeks. We were just discussing before we hit record how long it's been since we've done a podcast because you were doing all your European globetrotting and whatnot. So it's good to be back in the studio, and by studio I mean my office and your office. Maybe one day we'll have a studio.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
But anyway,
we have a platform called Studio.
Yeah, exactly. To get into value add, it's basically everybody likes to say value add when they talk about their apartment investing strategy, but I think that's a pretty broad term, and I think our definition is a bit more specific. And basically, it revolves around the amount of value add that you're doing. When you add value to an apartment complex, which is our business plan, you're increasing revenues. That's the whole point of adding value. You may have to pay a bunch of money to renovate units. You may replace the operator, the property managers with a better property manager to get rents up. You may market better. There's a bunch of different ways to do it that we're about to get into. But the main gist of it is that you're increasing revenues. And when you increase revenues, you increase the value of what people would pay for the property. That's the bottom line of what we're trying to do when we add values. We take a property that for whatever reason is operating at level X, we raise revenues and potentially cut expenses, and now it's operating at level Y, and level Y is the gap between X and Y is kind of, that's what drives our returns. That is what drives the numbers. And I just did the newsletter we sent out this week as we record it. I talked about the percentages, and this is what drives IRR, is the magnitude of that value that you can add.
Well, so first, I just want to get this out of the way. Those of you who have been with us from the beginning may remember that Matthias and I had a little convo about the term value add and how it grates upon my literary and rhetorical soul. But it is, as we're going to hopefully show today, and as Matthias has got started off, it's a major principle and core to this business. So what we really hope to do is make it very clear what this kind of generic term means. But I think another thing I have to quibble with real quick is, why are they revenues instead of just revenue? Because in my experience, the plural is the singular. What? Because if we're coming from one building, if it's one investment, why would it not be a singular revenue? Please do tell.
Because it's periodic. It's not the way I look at it is each month is a revenue stream, and then next month revenue. So I don't know. You're the English PhD, so you can probably have the final say on how we're going to type this out. But I probably
this
will
is
continue saying
shorthand
revenues.
for revenue streams. Okay, which is kind of hard to. That's a lot. Also, don't cross the streams. So I guess we should stick to revenues. Only the older people listening to us will get that cross the stream joke. But anyways, okay. Well, we gotta call. Anyways, all right. So let's dive in here though, because I think any sensible person, and obviously anyone listening to this podcast is a sensible person, understands that the way to make money is make more money than the other person did with the same stuff. So let's just try to talk about the approach to finding the kind of place that will not definitely. We don't want to say definitely. Let me knock on that wood right here. We are fairly confident, right? Will lead us to a place where we can increase revenues. I'm going to start spelling it with a Z just for funsies. So there's a lot of different things to jump in here, but I think maybe just starting, why don't we just start by, there's two ways you define something. I always used to tell my students this is what it is not. Those are the only two ways you can define anything. So we kind of did a what it is. So why don't we further define it by what it is not, by contrasting it to maybe other investment strategies in this space that's not what they're going for. They're trying to do something else.
Yeah, okay. So I'd say the other big one is more of a cash flow play. So a lot of times, what you'll do is you'll the big, and this is kind of institutional buyers, REITs, and hedge funds. When they buy properties, they're usually buying for stabilized cash flow. So they're not trying to increase the rate significantly. They understand the value of the property as it currently sits. They hope it continues to appreciate over time. But really, what they're buying is the stabilized cash flow for the next X amount of years, however long they want to hold that investment. So they're not really interested in coming in and renovating and jacking rents way up or whatever. They're more interested in, I have here, it's like buying a bond. I am buying a stable income over the next period of time that I'm buying. That's more of a cash flow strategy, or because basically it's holding value and it's paying you at the same time is kind of their philosophy. They're preserving cash, capital, whatever you want to call it, and they're not necessarily trying to grow a net worth or build wealth. That's primarily the
Oh, I
only
see.
other. Everybody else,
That's what I'm saying.
everybody else calls it value add, and they could do it poorly, they could do it well. They could try to flip it, or they could try to add value and then ride the new stabilized cash flow for a long time, which is our strategy. But in general, that's really the only two. Or you can develop. Develop is the other one, is where you're
Yeah, right.
building,
So that's the third, right? Where you're
starting
building
from
one.
zero.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are the only real strategies that you can do when it comes to multifamily investing specifically. So,
Yeah, I think the building wealth thing is one that maybe, I mean, I think there's people might be confused about that, because if you have the money or you gather the money to invest in a property, sure, if you're a hedge fund, that's a different play. But if you say we did a syndication for one that was just we were buying the income. I mean, we're still placing money that is safe and growing and getting income. So the wealth model is just different, I would say.
Yeah, exactly. And it depends on what you're looking for. So in my newsletter, again, I'm going back to it. We discussed IRR, and IRR is basically how quickly the big chunks of money come back to you. And the higher the IRR, the quicker the bigger chunks are coming back. Now, if you're more interested in living off of these, off of an investment, let's say, you have $1 million to invest and you want to live off $100,000 a year. Okay, you need a 10% cash on cash return in order to live off of, for your $100,000. You're not so much concerned about getting a big chunk of money back, because you're trying to live off of you see what I'm saying? So it kind of depends on the objectives of your investors and what you're trying to go for. And I like to, ideally, in the long run, I'll have both options. I'll have, hey, this one is more of a cash flow play, guys. It's going to pay you well as long as we hold it, versus this one over here, which is going to help you build big chunks of wealth quickly.
Right, because you're not going to, well, first of all, on the timeline, you're not necessarily looking to sell it all, so they're not necessarily going to get the money back in the same time frame.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to refi over time periodically.
You're not expecting the value of the investment to increase to the same level. Sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. Well, actually, not to get us off track a little bit, but we're sort of entering, as has also been pushed out recently on the newsletter and otherwise, we're sort of entering the development space as well, of a sort. So maybe one of these days we will be that triple threat, right? The trifecta. We can run, we can hit, and we can field, as they say, the 5-tool player. Also, the more sophisticated podcaster would not timestamp an episode by referring to something that is specific to a date, but we'll get better at that. One of these days we're gonna have so many in the bank that we don't have to do this every week. We'll give ourselves some flexibility. Anyways, okay, let's jump back in here though. So let's talk about that main part. I mean, the main part of value add is that a property is underperforming, right? I mean, that's where it starts. A property has potential that its current management, for whatever reason, incompetency, lack of interest, lack of money, whatever the case may be, is not maximizing that value. Can you give our listeners, and me, of course, remember, you're trying to teach me too, a little insight into how you make that kind of calculation, how you look at an apartment and think pretty sure that it will be able to, right? Because, I mean, we're going to get into the metrics a little bit, but just in general.
Yeah, so one of the easiest ways that I can tell a property is underperforming, doing no other research, is if I can find it on apartments.com or rent.com or whatever. And I go, it's like, you go Zillow, I'm trying to find a property to rent as a renter. And if I go and I know the property exists, I know where it is on a map, I go and I type in the zip code or whatever, and I look and I see what's available. And if I cannot find that property being listed on where everybody goes, or the vast majority of people go to find an apartment if they're moving to an area, if I can't find it on there, I'm almost 100% sure at that point that the rents are low, because they're missing a huge demographic in terms of potential customers coming their way. So obviously, signage and response of property management company once somebody gets the phone number for the to look at apartment, all that stuff all plays into it. But the easiest way from afar that I can look at it and go, if I can't find you online, that means customers can't find you online. I know where you are, they don't, and so that's a clear indicator to me that they're not pushing out. They don't have professional management that's pushing out their profile and their units, their marketing for a particular 1, 2, 3 bedroom, whatever it is. I know that they're not marketing to the level that we expect of our managers. So it's that's a clean kill in terms of in my opinion. Obviously, once we get a little more details on the property, we basically do a survey of market rents in the area for similar units, and you go, okay, why is this guy at the bottom one? It could be answered by the poor marketing. It could be answered by the units are the same size and the same great location, but the alternative properties are renovated to a certain level that this one is not. It's outdated or whatever. So once I realized that it's not being marketed properly, and we do that rent survey, then find out that it's below its comparable rentals in the area, that's a really good indication that it's not performing properly.
Okay, so wait, I just want to make it clear, guys. You heard it here first. One of the major inroads to a brilliant investment strategy is just finding people who are bad at the interwebs.
I want to say it's bad at the interwebs. I just think it's bad at they're not intentionally pushing it out, and that's
yeah. I mean, I know it's true. I mean, I knew it before I joined this whole adventure of ours, but it definitely found it out to be true then. But it just seems crazy. I mean, just as a side note, that someone would have a property where they need people to, inhabit it to make money, and they wouldn't find all the ways possible to market it. Also, it's not like the internet is new. This is not 2002.
Yeah, so I think what they rely on, and I've come across this a lot, they'll have a decent website. Some of these good sized properties, that 150, 200 units or something that support a website for their community, their little apartment community. They'll have a website and they'll be like, okay, we're on the internet, we're good. If nobody knows the name of your company and you haven't maximized your SEO, your search engine, so if anybody Googles apartments in whatever this town or neighborhood is, and you're not the top one each time, then nobody's ever going to find your property if they don't know the name of it, unless they drive by and then try to look it up on your website. And that's cool, but you're missing. Not everybody's going to drive by your property on their way in town, because they're trying to look for places to live. So you got to be in all those apartments.com, rent.com. You got to be in there, and you got to have a profile, and it can direct you to the website to learn more or whatever. But you got to have pictures, and you got to have marketing and all these broad, really broad strokes. And a lot of them don't. They're like, hey, we got a website, we're online, done.
Yeah.
And
Look,
I go,
right here.
sweet,
Here it
that
is.
sounds good, because that's a problem I could fix real easily.
Yeah, so I mean, I assume you have to pay to be on Zillow or renter.com or whatever, but it's not.
Yeah, I mean, no, it's not cost prohibitive at all, and especially the bigger the property, the easier it is. For a couple $100 a month, maybe. I don't even know. Probably not even that much, honestly, because it may be you'll have subscriptions, or whatever. That's a property management function, and my property managers, are experts in all that, so I can go find my stuff. So
I mean, and it's kind of counterintuitive to rely on just your own website because, like you said, people have to be able to look you up. If and you don't want to be an apartment complex that's on a major thoroughfare, really, depending on what location you're at. Like, right? It would be more real traffic for a lot of people. Yeah, to be kind of tucked back a little bit, close to things, but not right there on where everybody's going to drive by.
Sure.
Wow, that's just putting up billboards rather than. That's interesting. That's just so interesting. That just the most basic thing. Now, let me ask you a question. When you do find their info, the property management info, do you secret shop it?
Try.
Do you act like you're interested in an apartment and see what happens?
That's another indicator. It's a good question because it's a perfect segue into I'll call and act like I want to rent a unit, and you would be amazed at the amount of times. Hi, I'd like to check out one of your 2 bedrooms. Here's my number, and I never hear back. Nothing. Either they don't answer and I leave a message, or they don't answer. There's no answering machine, and I haven't been. There's properties that I've called multiple times. I've never been called back, and then I go. I know for a fact that they're not 100% occupied. Well, first of all, that's just poor business practices anyway. Because you should be, even if you're 100%, you should be building a list and say, hey, we'll let you know.
Mhm.
You're number one as soon as we get one vacant or coming vacant. We'll let you know. That's
Right.
how you're supposed to do it. They must just have so many people that they don't want another tenant. So that's something that I run into a lot. That's another one, is if they don't even respond to it. I was like, if I walked in there, I've secret shopped an apartment complex before, and the office was locked and closed. It was in the middle of a day on a work day, and there was nobody working in the office. It was just like, see you later. You can call if you want. We won't answer. And I'm like, I don't understand how you manage a business like this, but you
What
find it.
about email? Do you shoot emails acting like you are
I've done that
interested
too.
too,
Yep,
or
done it all.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's all to see like, hey, what's the customer service like? What's a lot of property owners? I don't think I have a big enough portfolio to really worry about it yet. But a lot of property owners or
They'll do it
asset
themselves.
managers, like we do, will do their own properties and check up on
Yeah.
their own property managers.
Please, can I play the boss in an undercover boss situation? That would yes. Please let me do that. I want to do this. That would be
Sure.
awesome. Okay. Now, so that we're talking about quality, obviously. This is a
Hmm.
quality assessment. So that's management.
Hmm.
But there's another side to the quality assessment that seems maybe a
Yep.
little bit less straightforward. So let's talk about I mean the easiest one is this landscaping is shit, right?
Yeah.
Like what is happening here? They're not taking care of it. But let's go into the other things that you look for in that. And do not say it has good bones. No one wants to hear that.
Well, if a property has good bones, but it finishes. It finishes. It does the exterior look like it's nice and new. New is always better, right? So, from How I Met Your Mother,
Except for
newer is
scotch.
always better. Yeah, exactly. So, everything looking new is important to tenants. They don't want to feel like they live in a. I mean, unless they're trying to live in a home from the 1900s that has been renovated to newer standards, or whatever, which is a
Yeah,
different niche.
historic of some sort, not just
Yes,
run down.
exactly. Exactly. So everything looking new, sharp, crisp, that's a big that helps you get demand rent premiums because people want to live in those places. If they're picking between two at the same price and one of them looks newer and sharper, they're going to go to that one. Oh, it just goes into the mindset, the mental. As a tenant, you want to live in a newer, more secure, brighter, crisper, sharper, all that. So that could be on the outside of a building or of a property, right in line with the landscaping, or it could be on the inside too. Like, for instance, in Savannah, we walked into those units and we were like, because there was a big premium that they weren't getting. They were below all the comps, and we were like, why aren't they getting them? We walked into some units during due diligence. We were like, this is why. It's because everything in on the interiors, the caulking around cabinets and sinks and stuff, it all looked old. It looked sloppy, and it wasn't sharp. It wasn't crisp. It didn't look new. There was like, you could tell that some door jambs had been painted like 15 times. So like, they start to like expand out and get bigger and bigger as you paint more and more on them. And it's like,
And you can
God,
just
yeah,
stab it and
yeah,
it'll
like looks
bounce back
puffy.
on you. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like
Uh-huh.
puffy. It's
Because they
exactly
didn't strip
that
it. They
thing.
just painted over it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, at a certain point, everything in here just feels old, and that's a big part of it. So that can be fixed with proper workmanship from your handyman or your contractors whenever you're doing renovation, stuff like that. So those are things that we notice when we walk in units that tenants notice too. So we always try to assume to look at it as the tenant would look at it, and the sharper, crisper, newer looking, the door handles, doorknobs, like newer, the polished nickel, whatever, just
Mm-hmm.
little things like that they just help the property feel younger, feel newer, regardless of the actual age of the property. That's almost irrelevant. But really, does it feel new, crisp, and fresh? That's what we go for in our properties. And how we identify when a property doesn't feel like that there's some room to run.
I mean, in some ways, actually, it's not actually a room to grow. It's a room to remove, right? They have too much paint on the walls. You need to get rid of it.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
That's an architectural tip there, everyone. Doors are so important because they're focal points. You don't necessarily pay attention to any particular part on a wall, but a door, you got to walk through it and you got to open it. So if a door is new and a handle is new, it's going to draw the attention. Now, I mean, I think the bigger thing that everyone probably kind of understands is if you walk into an apartment and it's got dingy Formica countertops and older appliances and suspect carpet and stuff like that.
And so I do want to say that there's not anything inherently wrong with the Formica countertops and older appliances. There's a level to that. So if you're in a really affordable neighborhood setting and you're not going for the nicest property on the block, or it's a solid C plus B minus class apartment complex where you're just blue collar workers, Formica is fine, because if you put in the granite countertops and the stainless steel appliances, you might be pricing these guys out of being able to live there because of the rent you're going to have to charge in order to cover that. So it really depends on the neighborhood and the level that you're renovating to. Are you achieving the level that you're advertising? Let me put it that way. Are you saying, hey, we're the nicest apartment in this area? Or are you saying, hey, this is solid, safe, secure, blue collar housing right here? Or what are you trying to say? That and making sure that your finishes in your apartment meet that level, or even exceed it a little bit, is kind of the goal.
Yeah, I don't mean to look down upon or besmirch Formica, but I will say that if you're talking about looking new and sharp, an old Formica countertop is
very
not
much
look
looks
great.
bad. Correct.
Yeah, you can replace the Formica with other Formica, but
with fresh, which we have done in some of our units, some of our lower end stuff which is fine. People love it because it doesn't price them out of the market,
Right. Yeah, and it should be noted. Oh, actually, I had a question about that I want to get to, but it should also be noted, just to circle back, that the people who are probably looking at apartments, for the most part, are going to skew younger, for the most part, right? Like younger-ish. My point being, people who have been on the internet most of their lives. So if they can't find you on the internet, they're going to think you don't exist.
That's the problem. That's how they do everything. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, that just comes full circle there. Well, so, I mean, it seems like to me, and you tell me if I'm wrong here, if you have a dingy outside. So first of all, guys, I guess in the spreadsheet, there's just a dinginess factor that goes into the calculations. It's highlighted in yellow, obviously, for obvious reasons.
It's kind of a tan yellow. It's really not.
Yeah, exactly. Sort of beige, but a little sickly yellow cast nobody wants to see. So if you see the outside and it's like, let's say the vinyl siding is bad, and maybe it's a little bit bad, not in great repair. It's not like falling off or anything. It could definitely be power washed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But then you go inside and like everything's pretty good, right? Like they've done a decent job keeping up the interior. Which is the better scenario? That or a great outside where they haven't renovated the inside enough? Or is that either or depends?
Either or depends, which is my answer to almost everything. So I apologize for that. But you got to think, what are people seeing first? If most of if you're properly marketing online, they're looking at your interior pictures first.
Sure.
If you require or rely on a lot of walk-up business, people driving by and calling you when they see your number on the sign, or even just pulling in because you have great visibility from major thoroughfares or something like that, then your exterior is going to be more important because it's the first thing they see, right? People can get over, lackluster, let's call it lackluster landscaping, if what drew them to the property in the first place was dazzling interiors and large closets and, all these things that you have pictures of online in your market. So I'd say it's whatever they see first is probably most important. Obviously, you want to have both of them up to high levels, but I'd say whatever they see, whatever your target customer sees first is probably the most important factor.
I mean, I got to say, in my own history of apartment shopping, you can definitely get past either like the landscape being sparse or maybe the outside not being as crisp as it could, or maybe you can tell that it's had some age, but then you walk inside and you're like, whoa, okay, I'm not going to be living outside my building. So this is
hopefully.
Yeah, this is cool. I like this. Here's another, we had a whole conversation about pantries being key, right? Another one that I think is key in this space is a solid balcony outdoor space. I think not enough people pay attention to that because, like, you feel kind of cramped in an apartment sometimes. You need a little fresh air, get outside. Yeah, that was always one I was looking for. Like, whoa, look how big this balcony is.
Sure.
Well, for me, I could put plants out here, but anyways. So let's talk about these renovations though, because that's a big part of it, right? Like, a part of the value add strategy here is ideally we find some place that there's been some renovation, but they haven't kept up, and they haven't therefore kept up with the market. And we've looked at the prices and seen that we could bring it up. So let's talk about renovation calculations. What's that look like? How's that work? I mean, I think that's probably one of the biggest pieces of this.
Well, the first thing you do is you want to determine what level you want to achieve. So you look at all your competition and you see who's getting the best market premium and why. You go, okay, is it because they have the nice appliances? Is it because they have the biggest rooms? Because they have all three, or both of those things? You figure out what your target level of renovation is, because what you don't want to do is go pour in a bunch of money that the market wants. Okay, for renovation calculations, we look at obviously the level that we want to renovate to. We evaluate the market. You don't want to go into a lower class neighborhood, a low income neighborhood, and renovate to luxury standards, because nobody in that neighborhood can achieve those or can pay those rents. They can afford to pay those rents. So you decide your market. You go, okay, you take maybe the nicest three properties of similar class, and you go, what rents are they getting? And three or four, let's say you do basically a survey, because there's some, who knows what's to say that there's three or four properties that aren't being run quite correctly. So maybe nobody's getting the premium that they could be getting. So you would evaluate that according to size of the unit and what you expect them to be able to pay. You also kind of you do an analysis of what the income in the area is, and you want to stay below that three times rent equals your income threshold. You want to stay below that. And that means that people actually can afford, they make enough money to live at whatever this rent you're projecting. So once you've decided that, you go in, and the more, honestly, the bigger scale of renovations, the cheaper it is per unit, right? So if you have a contractor and they're doing 50 units for you, kind of all one by, all in sequence, they're going to give you it's like, okay, cool. We, gave them a job for the next 2 months. They're going to give us kind of a better deal on that versus doing one unit renovation. You're going to pay probably, up 8 to 9, 10,000 per unit for doing one at a time versus 6, 7,000 per unit to do the same level of renovation. So obviously economy of scale definitely helps on that. But that's basically how we calculate what we're going to do. Do we want to put granite countertops and stainless steel because it makes sense, and that's how we can achieve the same level of rent our competition is at, but maybe even a little better. It all depends on what the analysis is saying.
Right. And then so that goes back to, for those of you who have been with us from the beginning, we had a conversation about the different types, the letters A, B, C types of apartment complexes and what you're aiming for. And A is like the luxury apartments where there's lots of amenities and a lot of things offered, services as well. Those are the kind of,
often
that is
in
not,
like downtown loft type situations where you're in a
yeah,
high rise, or those are
right.
class A luxury. Yeah.
Yeah. Everything about it is, aiming for the max 100%. And that's not 100% quality, 100% of like, oh, just anything you could think of that we could do, we're going to do, and it's going to be in this particular location. So when those calculations are made for us, or when Matthias makes those calculations, we're aiming for the next level down. Very good, solid, excellent housing, but not trying to be luxury, which I think most people can understand the difference between those two. The reasoning being because people, if there's any downturn, the A is the first to lose out for the most part. That's not all that it goes into it, but yeah. So when he says we're looking for a C or a B, or this is what the area is, that's what he's talking about. So in simple terms, like a C might be the one you put in for mica, the BB plus you're going to put in the granite. Like you don't have to be you don't have to be posh to like a good kitchen with the granite, right? That's just something that a lot of people look for. So yeah, so that's an interesting point you made though about like how many to renovate at one time, because I mean, obviously occupancy is a is a complicating factor in this. I mean, don't worry, guys, no one's getting tossed out so we can renovate. But at the same time, if you have to wait for people to move out to renovate, you can't do too many at the same time. So talk a little bit about that approach.
Yeah. So actually, you're never going to do 50 units at a time, but if you say I need to do 50 units over the course of 2-3 months, I mean, no crew is going to, I mean, unless this guy has like hundreds of workers, he's not going to be able to do that many
Right.
at a time anyway. More than likely he's going to do 2 or 3 at once and have his guys kind of go progressively. So if you have a big enough property where vacancies happen, just normal vacancies, somebody's moving in, somebody's moving out, somebody's moving on, the bigger the property, the more likely it is that you're going to be able to go, all right, we have, at any given time, our occupancy is, let's call it 95, 96%. So let's say in a 100-unit property, okay, that means we're roughly 4 at any given time units that are in some sort of turnover. So, okay, what we would do in that scenario is we would say to the contractor, we'd say, okay, how many can you do at once? Cool. He says, I can probably do 6 over the course of 2 weeks. And so you'd basically wouldn't market, if your average was 4, you wouldn't market 2 of them every time they came undone, and to get a little bit of leeway. Usually your occupancy will go down while you're doing renovations for this reason, is that you want to keep him working while he's working on it and get it done quicker rather than later, because that just keeps your overall cost down. So what we do, like that's what we're doing in Savannah, is basically we're intentionally going to let vacancy creep up because we are renovating those units faster. So you draw a fine line between cash flow, because you still got to pay bills while you're doing renovations, but you know where that break even is, where I have to have at least X amount, 80%, 85% occupied in order to have very strong cash position. Okay, so maybe you induce a 15% vacancy or down towards your break even number in order to be able to speed up the renovation process and keep that guy working, that contractor that you've hired, and keep those costs low.
All right. So yeah, no one's getting thrown out. I do wonder how often though it happens that a tenant's like, "Hey, I have an unrenovated one, and I saw the renovated one. I want to move." Has that happened to you yet?
Oh yeah, it's awesome, because if you're trying to
Yeah.
renovate more units, you keep him. There's no break. He just moves into one of the ones you just renovated. Now his unit is vacant. You can renovate it, and you don't have to market a new tenant. You've already checked him out. You can literally just in the system move him from one unit to another, and boom. And often they're willing to pay whatever the new rent premium is too, because they're like, hey, that's a really nice unit, and they
Yeah.
don't have to move that far. All the nice things about staying put, plus the new nice renovated unit.
Yeah, and it seems like, not that this is something we need to do, but even if for some reason you really needed to get into some units, you could just incentivize through
We do. It is a known technique.
reduction. Yeah.
It's basically, well, and also you can offer a break, like, hey, for the first 3 months, if you guys will sign a new lease in the new unit, as a way to entice your current residents over and to keep that momentum going in renovations. It's great, and tenants love it a lot too. They're like, sweet, I'm gonna have to pay the premium eventually anyway. I can go over there sooner, get a little break for 3 months, maybe a few hundred off or whatever incentive we come up with.
Yeah.
Is like, cool. They're like, sweet, no problem here. Everybody wins.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to remember, I mean, I stayed in a lot of apartment complexes down through my lengthy educational career. I'm trying to remember if any of them were ever doing any kind of big turnover like that. I don't think they were. I don't think I ever saw that.
At one point, I was incentivized during flight school. I was incentivized to move from one building across the street to the other. And by incentivized, I mean they said, hey, this dorm we've been forcing you to stay in is condemned. We're going to force you to stay in the other one before we condemn it too. That's how that went.
Think
I was like,
that's
okay, I'll
a
move.
little bit different of a scenario.
Yeah, that was a government housing situation on base right next to a runway, which was,
yeah. Oh wow.
yeah,
Just so many things to lull
all
you
the
to sleep.
amenities, all the amenities. I think you actually visited me when I lived in there. I think that was the one that had the little kitchen right in the back.
Yeah, was that
I think
in San
it's San
Antonio?
Antonio. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember. Yeah, that was.
Yeah, we had like little
I mean, that was
hot
early.
plates and stuff. It was
Yeah,
that wasn't
yeah. I mean, by
that
the
wasn't my
end of
best
it,
ever living conditions.
No, but by the end of you were like C-130 school was in Little Rock, right? So
Yeah.
you had that big house with like one other person.
Yeah, well, at times there was like 3 of us at one point, but everybody was coming and going because they're different training days. But yeah, that
Yeah.
house was awesome. The party house.
All right. Well, I'm running out of questions here. You're just doing such a good job explaining, Matthias. Is there any? I mean, I think we've already talked about management and how that looks.
There is one other thing, actually.
Okay. Well, I had one
Yeah.
small question though that I don't think really. I mean, this is not really crucial, but I just want to know, like, if there is a single item that is like the most effective in raising like renovation. Like, if you had to choose one thing to do, you couldn't do the whole apartment other than paint and caulk and stuff. Like, all right, here's the one thing we're going to do that will definitely add value to this apartment. What is that thing?
Flooring. It's flooring.
That makes sense.
You go from old carpet to LVP flooring, luxury vinyl plank, or even like just a newer, more modern carpet. It makes the world of difference, and it's impossible for people to miss.
Yeah, I mean that LVP. I mean, it looks good. It's easy to clean. They know that there's not like other people's mites and germs in the carpet. Yeah.
Yep.
It's a big deal.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it honestly, it looks brand new pretty much if you clean it. If you clean it regularly, it always looks new. It's pretty sweet stuff. But yeah, the other thing I wanted to talk about that I didn't really address, but there's one other kind of way to add value, to do a value add. Apartments are valued on the net income that they have. So we talked earlier about raising revenues. Well, the other thing to increase your net income is to cut expenses. So there are properties that we come across where, and usually this is big when it's mom and pop kind of. This is our retirement plan. We're going to operate this apartment community as a day job. That's what we do. Is we run the thing. The owners do everything themselves, and there always ends up being a lot of value to add to those because it's really hard to run a thing by yourself, especially the bigger you get. And sometimes we'll be looking at like a 70 unit complex that one person's doing, and like they're cutting their own grass and they're doing all these things. But what they do is the expenses are usually higher on that because what they do is they try to tax incentivize, try to do it as the most tax advantage way possible. So they'll accept high expense. They'll pay themselves potentially, or they'll pay friends or family high expenses in terms of like, hey, our groundskeeper is my son and I pay him a higher percentage because I can write that off as an expense. Like above market rates in terms of all the different costs associated with running a property. You'll see that a lot. Like they'll be paying thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars for an accountant, or it turns out they're doing the accounting themselves. That are just another way they're paying themselves in a tax advantage way. All this stuff is perfectly legal, but when you pull up the trailing 12, as we talked about before, and look at the expenses, you're like, oh my goodness, they're spending a crazy amount on education. That I've seen that recently in a property that they clearly were. They called it professional education, professional development, or something.
Continuing education. Yeah.
Things like that. It's like that is something that you can write off. The IRS lets you write off, but it in no way required for running an apartment complex. So you'll see that a lot too. So, and then there's other ways like, maybe the way they charge tenants for water or utilities, or the way they're paying utilities versus letting the tenants pay them. All these things can be ways that you can really cut costs, and that frankly adds value. So if you can run in, take over and run things more efficiently, that's adding value too. And a lot of times it ends up being a mix of like all of the above when you take over. Because if they're messing up one thing pretty good, chances are they're not really great at doing the other 2 or 3 aspects of controlling expenses, marketing, all these things we've talked about.
Yeah. So that is interesting, the way in which they would have structured it to help them out as a single kind of entity, or a personal private, versus when you're taking over as a syndication with a management program, or management
team, exactly,
not a management program. Yeah,
I'm not allowed to funnel my property manager or my professional development expenses through a property that I own with investors, because that's me just bilking my investors if I'm doing that. So
right. On that though, that made me think, well, I mean, so I always appreciated it as a tenant when like water was included and I didn't have to worry about it. And it felt like I was probably paying more than I had to, maybe, but it didn't matter. It was like maybe a little bit more, but then I didn't have to worry about it. Is that usually the case? I never really investigated it because you don't have a choice. If you like the place to live, you do it however they want to do it. But I just never wanted to mess with anything but power.
So yeah, so it depends. So number one is you can't bill tenants for water if it's not metered, or like you
That's
can't
true.
just
If it's one big
completely
thing,
remove yourself from the scenario. You can bill them back, but there's regulations on what you can do. You can never like charge
right?
over what basically you take it and you prorate. If there's the 3 bedrooms have a higher rate, you take the entire water bill for the whole thing. 3 bedrooms account for X amount of it. And there's a bunch of like regulations on how you're supposed to divide it all up, but it all ends up being you're never really recruit more than 80% of the costs in that scenario, and that's market driven. So basically, you look at all the other apartments in the area, how do they do it? What are tenants in our market used to? What do they appreciate? And that kind of drives what you're going to do. What you're capable of doing. If they're individually metered, if each unit is individually metered, you're almost always going to go let the tenants take care of it, and they'll be billed directly from the water company. And honestly, the problem with that we've experienced, the problem with having it paid, obviously you don't have a choice if it's not metered, but having it paid out of sight, out of mind for the tenants, meaning it's included, is that they tend to use a whole lot more because they're not worried about it.
Sure. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like the overall bill would go down for everyone if you could find a way to tell that to everyone. It's like, hey, you guys, everybody could do less if you guys would stop going, hey, it's already included. What? Showers for all my friends,
Is that a phenomenon you've witnessed? A shower party?
We have had tenants that like I can't make this up, use the faucet as a sound machine to sleep at night. Yes, sir.
No.
Yes, sir.
Wow.
We've
oh my gosh.
That particular tenant
that's crazy.
Was not 100% able to live on their own. It was determined shortly after that. So that was
okay.
That's not a normal thing. It was a person struggling, and
you don't have to be like an eco maniac to be like, probably shouldn't be doing that. Cost wise, ecology wise. That's insane,
the water company called us and was like, you have a huge leak. And we spent 2 days with scoping lines and everything. So we can't find this leak. And they're like, well, find the unit where this is going on. But the person was only doing it at night, right? When they're trying to sleep.
Right.
So like when we're over there with people during the day, we're like, I don't understand it. So we eventually figured it out. And it was like, oh my gosh. And I think that person is getting help now. But that was an interesting one.
Look at you, the gumshoe out there, solving mysteries. Gonna have to you have to turn that into a some kind of comedy noir.
You know what we should do a LinkedIn post.
Maybe it should be like
a good idea.
Yeah, you should do a LinkedIn post about that. Maybe even a newsletter. I don't know. Maybe it's trying to maybe write it as a Hardy Boys like scene. That is, because dude, that's an app on your phone. It'll give you Babbling Brook like that.
This person was in dire straits as it kind of became apparent.
Oh my goodness. Okay, well, I guess the only last thing I have is like, I don't know if this even really applies, but I'm just wondering about, when you're starting to try to structure the investment and the loan, and you're thinking long term about refinancing, and like, what's that play in with the renovation timeline? How much renovation there is? Goals, like what's that interplay there?
Yeah, so we basically would time our projections for the end of, or for basically being stabilized, right? That's what you can refinance when you're stabilized at the new premium level, at the new income level, as it were. So it all depends on the level of the renovations. We kind of we have a pretty good idea. We've been doing it a while, knowing how long it takes to do what in what size units. So basically you do that, you multiply it by how many you can do at a time and how long, and then you basically predict how long you think it'll be to renovate all the units. And then you basically a year after that, now you put everybody up, you're done renovating, you're now stabilized at the new high level. You want to be able to show the bank a period of time. Sometimes it's 3 months, but it's usually easier to do, easier to talk to the bank and stuff. If you got 6 months at a certain level of income, they're like, yeah, let's go, let's do refinance. You guys have added the value to this property. We're good to lend you
the income has
more money on this property now in full cash.
These streams are rising.
we just build timelines on top of each other and kind of from day one, how long is it going to take to do a unit? How many units we doing? How many can do at a time? All those factors go in, and then that gives us our projection. And then, you know me, we add a lot of time onto that. We
Yeah,
assume everything's
right.
going to go wrong for our projections that
And
we
then
present to
that every
investors.
other unit is going to take twice as long as you thought, and that some
Exactly.
construction worker is actually only going to, I don't know, run through a wall, and there's going to be
Yep.
bigger cost. And I don't know if he
All
wouldn't have
those
run
things
through
we
a wall.
build
He would have
into
been
our projections so that,
unfortunately tripped.
yeah.
Not saying that a construction worker would run through a wall. I do have one curio, just a little curio question. Because we take over places, right, that have ideally have already started some renovations, right? So we can kind of just,
Yeah, it
kind
depends.
of jump
Sure.
in there. Depends for sure. Now, what's the situation when they have renovated it, some of them, but they didn't renovate it like the way you would, or as much as they did a little bit less than what you would, but it's not enough of a gap to go back and renovate those. So like, do we ever have like levels of renovation? I know I've seen that one in places I'm looking at for sure, where they're like, well, this is the original and here's this renovation and now here's the new ones we're doing.
Yeah, oftentimes you'll renovate the oldest ones first because typically there is some sort of premium that the mid-range one, right? The kind of renovated, not the way I want it. Usually there is some sort of premium, so you would do those last. You would go from the low end to the high end as quickly as possible, and then you may or may not continue on the back end and take those mid ranges up to where you want them to be. It becomes a cost calculation. It's like how much would it be to get like if they put in nice Formica, but you wanted to put in granite, you just run the cost and say, how long would it take me to earn my money back at a new premium if I
Right.
spend several thousand to do granite in here versus just leave the Formica? And that's just the cost benefit analysis that you run. Because the good news is you have better data to input. You know exactly what your renovated units have been getting for a long period of time, and typically they're higher than whenever you started, right? Because it takes a while to do a whole complex.
I mean, at the same time, I guess going to that cost is, well, I can't raise the rent to the other level if it's not the same like type of apartment. So
right,
back and forth.
Yeah, and so
I think I guess
you just kind of
the stickiest situation would just be like they renovated it and it's fine, but they just made an aesthetic choice that is just horrendous. Right, like
that happens.
Like there's nothing wrong with this apartment, but this red is terrible.
Yes, very much so, and that's just unfortunate. And frankly, that's been a deal killer before because it's like, look, it's got tile floors, it's getting the premiums, but the tile floors are puke red, brownish puke red.
Absolutely. I saw that one. It was just hideous. Yeah.
It's like I don't know what I can do with this other than replacing the flooring, which isn't. They're not offering a huge discount at the seller is like, oh, the floors are fine, and they're right, they are fine. They just look terrible. What can you do?
You can't really just paint tile on the floor.
Choices were made.
Choices were made. You really hope that whoever put that in did get a discount on that tile.
I don't know. Maybe they found some really cheap tile.
Yeah, maybe. Well, I think I've run out of questions, and I suppose based on the whole premise of this podcast that means we've reached the end. If I don't understand,
sure.
If I don't have any more questions and I understand things, then
that's always the goal.
That's the goal, right? So, all right, what's up?
No, I'd say we something that we got to start doing as professional podcasters now is we got to start saying people subscribe, like, pass it on, share, whatever it is. Smash that thumbs up, whatever, depending on the app you're on.
I had just started doing that with like literally friends and family. Like I was telling Rachel, I was like, hey, jump on. I mean, she actually listens to it. I told her she didn't have to do that, but I was like, you need to go to the apps and like us. Yes. So if you're on Spotify, 5 stars, download. Even if you don't listen to it downloaded wise, download and delete it because you can stream too. Apple Podcasts, same thing. 5 stars. YouTube, 5 stars. Leave us a nice comment if you're watching on that. Substack. Honestly, I don't even know.
Probably like it and share. I don't know.
You can definitely like it. Absolutely. You can restack it. I know you can do those. I don't know if it has a rating. That's what I'm checking right now. I know you can restack and like and leave a comment, give us a heart emoji, those sorts of things. But I don't believe it is something that you can like do the 5 stars like you can on the other outlets. Now, you can listen on Apple and Spotify. You can watch on YouTube and Substack. You can also listen on Substack, but the two where the video is available. If you want to just, you want to take a gander at whatever we're pulling up, or you just want to see, these goofy faces look goofy while talking, any of these things are understandable. You can do that on Substack, or you can do it on YouTube. Now, I'm sitting here staring at us in episode 4, and I'm looking at what you can do. You can heart. It looks like you can leave a message. Please, we will take criticism, but phrased somewhat nicely. You can download, and you can always like and share. But that's about it. Is like, comment, or share. So no stars on this bad boy, but the restack would be awesome if you have your own Substack, and then YouTube, I think it's like button, and same thing. I feel like so many podcasters say smash that like button. I hate that phrase. Like, what? Smash it? What? It's a screen. It's a touch screen. What? There's nothing physical about it. There's no tactile depression of a button. Anyways, yes, please. If 5 stars or don't rate, obviously. But yes, as aspiring professional podcasters, we do need to start begging for those ratings. Good call. All right. Well, we of course will be back next week. The topic is to be determined, but stay tuned in because we will be having some guests in the near future. We're excited to add this to the repertoire. Add a guest, and they're going to have to just deal with the both of us, which I've been told by multiple close friends, family, and partners that dealing with the two of us together is trying. So we'll try to tone that down. A bit much. We'll try to tone that down for our guests so they don't hate us. But anyways, please subscribe, like, comment, etc. And please come back and hang out with us next week. I'm Jordan. I'll talk to you later.